Hello everybody, welcome to my first video for my beloved AISL class. Okay, and I am yours truly, Mr. Liu, and I'm so excited to make this video. Hopefully this video is gonna come a long way to help you to in fact, this would not be just the only video I'll be making. I'll be making a chain of videos. And hopefully this is going to help you over the course of this year, especially particularly in our AISL course. And what a fitting way to start off the video, knowing that it's the typhoon day. And I was hoping that the probably watching a video might be more beneficial for you than listening to me presenting it on the computer from distant learning, which I probably think is not going to be very effective. And of course, please, at any time, if you watch this video and you need to pause it to take notes, please feel free to do so. I'm going to keep this video quite brief. I don't think making a 30 minutes video is going to be very helpful, so I'm going to keep this video as short as possible. I'm just going to run through some of the details that you know about cumulative frequency graphs. Some of it you probably would have known from last year, but I think this would be a great way to do some revision and to revisit some of the concepts that you have done. Okay, again, the focus today is on cumulative frequency curves. All right, so let's really get down into things about like why we even bother to do statistical diagrams. Okay, I mean, we have done so many of these diagrams like histograms, box plots. You even learn things like the pie charts, bar charts, when you're way much younger back in the prep school. Well, I think it's really important, isn't it? Because, you have a bunch of data, you analyze the data, but you really do want to present the data so that we could start making sense of the data. I think that's really important. And being able to present this data in a concise manner also allows people to judge the data and to make some conclusions, some analysis from the data as well. So again, different graphs, obviously, they do represent data in a different light. They do have different functions as well, and this really applies to the cumulative frequency curves as well. Okay. So again, we don't just want to treat data in its raw form, because otherwise it's not really going to make any sense to us. Okay, so so really what I want to spend a bit of time today is to focus a little more on the cumulative frequency curves, and to provide you with some definitions on what cumulative frequency is all about, why we even draw those graphs, what kind of data is being used. I think that's what I really want to spend time on in this video. Okay, all right, let's get down straight to the definition. Okay, let's talk about cumulative. I think the key word cumulative is just another posh way of saying I add things as we go along. Okay, the word cumulative does sound like the word accumulating. All right, so it's just pretty much another way of saying it. Frequency. You probably have seen this in statistics very often. It's just another way or another posh way of saying total. So we put them together. It's just basically saying that we're trying to add the totals up as we go along. Okay, so let's look at some examples. Okay, here's an example for you. Just to summarize this information, we got 40 year 10 students who play Nintendo Wii on a gloomy week in January. Okay, we're going to learn how to draw a cumulative frequency curve, and we're going to use that to find the median, the interquartile range, and even draw a box plot. Yeah, so we can actually make connections, all right, between what we've learned in the previous class and in this video. So usually you get a table that looks something like this. You probably would have realized that the data on the left side, which is the hours spent playing, it always comes in a form of a group data. Usually it comes like in an interval. I think the rationale, if you think about this logically, the reason for us putting that in the group data is so that you may actually have students who play like 40 minutes of Wii, all right, or an hour and 20 minutes. So it's kind of hard to group these kind of data individually. So if you put that under, if you group these data, for instance, between 0 and 1 hours, 1 and 2 hours, it's probably easier to categorize such individual data under a group. So it probably makes more logical sense to group the data so that it looks less clunky rather than writing out the individual time that each student spent on playing Nintendo Wii. Does that kind of make any sense? Okay. And on the frequency column, you realize what this number means is basically 2 students who play between 0 and 1 hours. Then we have 5 who spend between 1 and 2 hours, and so on. Okay. What we want to do is, since we're drawing a cumulative frequency graph, then it makes sense that we have to add an extra column, which is what we call a cumulative frequency column. Okay, because in this data that's given to us is only frequency. That's not good enough. That's not what we want. Okay, because if you plot this data on the graph, then it should be using a histogram, not a cumulative frequency graph. Okay, so generally what we need to do is to add a cumulative frequency column to your table. I'll show you how to do that shortly, just to refresh your memory. Okay, and it will look something like that. Okay, and I'll do a bit of explanation, and hopefully this makes some sense. Now, we started off with 2 students playing between 0 to 1 hours. Okay, so again, these are the first 2 students who only play between 0 and 1 hour. So the cumulative frequency obviously would have to be the same number, which is the first 2 students. Okay, then we have another 5 students who play between 1 and 2 hours. Okay, so generally if you think about this, if you add 5 to 2, that gives me 7, isn't it? Okay, I'm just going to use my pen to show you how to get 7. Okay, so 7 here is basically taking this 5, okay, and we're going to add 2. Okay, and this 7 basically represent 7 students who play between 0 and 2 hours of Wii. Okay, again, we're just trying to accumulate these numbers so as to, in fact, if you think about this, we're just trying to summarize the information in a more concise way as well, rather than saying, oh, 2 students spend between 0 and 1 hours, 5 students spending between 1 and 2 hours. Why can't we just say 7 students spend between 0 and 2 hours? Wouldn't that make our life easier? I certainly think so. Okay, then we do the same thing again with 2 and 3 hours. We got another 10 students who spend that amount of time. So if I add 10 to 7, that gives me 17. All right, and I'll just do the same thing to get 32, 37, and eventually you realize that the last number here in the cumulative frequency column is always going to be the same number as the total number of students that we started off in the question. Does that make any sense? Okay, all right, maybe you should pause this video and really start to take notes. Okay, if this becomes a slight issue, I would suggest maybe just replay the section again on this example. Okay, all right, so I'm going to start moving on to show you how we can actually start to draw the cumulative frequency graph from this table. Okay, but what I'd like to reiterate is that there's a lot of information on the slides here that I obviously have shared with you guys, but what I intend to do is to highlight some of the key information. Okay, and if you prefer to read the more essential information, please go ahead and look at the slides again. Okay, but I'm just hoping that this little video is just to point out the key information that you need to know from a cumulative frequency graph, and hopefully this allows you to make some notes on your own and to be able to revisit a concept that you obviously have done last year, but I just hope that this helps in general. Okay, all right, so this is basically what I just have said. It's just a little summary of what I've just said earlier. Okay, now drawing the cumulative frequency graph, okay, a few things I do want to point out. I'm just going to put up some information here, okay? Now, from the table, when you draw a cumulative frequency graph, okay, now what I'm trying to say here in this particular case is that when you have your y and your x-axis, when you draw the graph, make sure that the y-axis is always going to be the cumulative frequency, okay, which makes sense, okay, because we're looking at the total number of students, and that usually comes on the y-axis. All right, and the horizontal axis will always be the hours spent playing, which is like your independent variable that we always look at when it comes to drawing graphs. But you may actually have a question now. I'm quite certain about this, is that with the interval that's given to us on the horizontal axis, and you realize that for each of the rows here, we got two numbers, which is 0 and 1. Now, the thing is, we are always so adapted to plotting points when you only have like a number in a table like this. Okay, so let's say if I would say there's only like 1 hour spent playing, that is quite easy to plot the graph because you're going to be plotting like 1 and 2. Okay, now just to give you a little tip again, when you draw the cumulative frequency graph, what you want to look at is the upper boundary. The upper boundary is the higher number that you see in each row. So like between 2 and 3, this is the upper boundary. Between 3 and 4, this is the upper boundary as well, okay, and so on. So that means that when you plot this onto your graph, what you want to do is you want to plot 1 as your x coordinate, and your 2 is going to be your y coordinate here. Does that make sense? Okay, then this one you want to plot like 2 and a 7. Okay, now just one more thing. Okay, now we do know that 2 students actually spend between 0 and 1 hours, okay, playing Wii. Now, did any student actually spend 0 hours or basically not playing Wii at all? Well, of course there's none. Okay, so if there is none, where do we actually start drawing the cumulative frequency graph? We're obviously going to start this at 0, 0. Okay, this will always be the starting point of a cumulative frequency graph. Does that kind of make sense? And if we have all these points, we can actually plot the points on the graph, which I will show you later how this looks like. Okay, so be a bit patient. All right, so let me just show you and a quick summary here of what I just said. After you plot the points, okay, not forgetting, please make sure you connect them or join them up with a smooth curve. Usually we do it freehand. I think that's fine. I know there is actually a curve ruler that you could use as well, but we don't need to purchase that. So we're just going to draw it freehand. I think as long as you can draw the curve decently, that's an acceptable curve. Try not to connect that with straight lines, okay? It needs to be a curve. So your curve may look significantly different from your friend's one, but the values where you calculate the things like the median, the interquartile range, which I'll come later, should be slightly different. Obviously, no two curves will be the same, but the values should not vary too much, okay? But I'll come to that shortly. Now, like I said, it needs to start at the origin at 0, 0, okay? Because nobody is playing less than 0 hours a week. Like, that's pretty obvious. Again, label your axis correctly, like what I just said earlier as well. Okay, now, if we plot the graph, this is actually how it's gonna look like, okay? Like I said, if you plot the points like what I just said earlier, it's actually gonna form a nice little curve. Remember, it starts at 0, 0. Remember to label the axis. So the curve would look something like this. If this is obviously done with technology, so it's obviously a nice curve, but as long as you're able to produce a very similar curve like this, generally you'll be fine. Okay. Now, just going to come down into the nitty-gritty details of what we could do with a cumulative frequency graph. The very common ones that we usually analyze is looking at the median and the interquartile range. And it's generally very easy to find those values. Now, the reason why we estimate the data is because we don't have the actual data about how much time is spent by the students playing Wii. Okay? And again, another reason would be if you draw the cumulative frequency graph by hand, the values are never going to be accurate in the first place. So again, an estimation obviously would be the most ideal way of getting these numbers as well. Okay. All right. I'm going to show you how to do it. But before we do that, let's do a bit of a quick recap. Median, we know that that's always the middle value. That's like 50% of your total frequency, which is like your 50th percentile. Okay. Generally, what you want to do is we want to look at the cumulative frequency axis, and we will take 50% of the total number that you see on your cumulative frequency. In this case, was like 40, right? So we'll take 50% of 40. That's actually going to be your the number that we're going to be looking at. So here is a little procedure on what we do with the median and the interquartile range. I'm just going to put it out here first. The slides are going to be shared with you, but what I would do as well is to explain on the next slide how you could actually find the median and the interquartile range. Okay, because I don't want to go through this because it gets really boring, but at the same time I think I want to show you like how it looks like on the graph, okay, for the median and the interquartile range as well. Okay, so let's get down to the details here. Now, this was the graph that we have produced. We're going to find the median. Now, we just said that the median is the 50th percentile. So what I'll do is I'll take 50% of 40. Why 40? Is because the number of students that's being surveyed about the time they spend on the Nintendo Wii is 40 students. So I'll take 50% of 40. Now, we know that this number is just 20, but this is not the median, okay? This is just telling me that this is half of the 40 students that we're looking at. We're looking at the median time, okay? So this is a big mistake that most students will make. They just take 50% of 40 and they say, oh, there we go, that's the median. But that's not what we want. We want the median time. So what we would do is we find 20. All right, we draw a horizontal line, all right, touching the curve. Then we draw another vertical line down to the horizontal axis, and that's the number I'm looking at, which is 3.2 hours. That's the median time. That's what I want. That's what you want. Upper quartile. Now, upper quartile, we do know now at this stage that is the 75th percentile, which is the 75%. So we do the same thing. We take 75% of 40, okay? And that gives me 30. And we go find where 30 is on the vertical axis. Then we draw a horizontal line. Then we draw another vertical line. And we find the number here, which is going to be 3.8 hours, okay? We do the same thing for the lower quartile, which is the 25th percentile. So I'll take 25% of 40, which is 10. And the lower quartile is 2.4 hours. And of course, if we find the interquartile range, which is the upper quartile, subtract the lower quartile, that's going to give me 1.4 hours. Okay? So this is generally how we use a cumulative frequency curve or graph to find some key information of the data that's been given to us. And that also shows the importance of the cumulative frequency graphs. Okay, but I just want to reiterate some things about the measures that we use here, like the median, the range, the interquartile range. Remember, the median is just another form of average, okay, which obviously would be very useful for us when it comes to analyzing data. And range and interquartile range really tells us about the consistency of the data, on how spread out the data is. Okay, so do remember, very important, why these values are useful for us when it comes to analyzing data. Okay. All right. Just one final thing I want to point out is that we can actually connect box plot and cumulative frequency curves in one diagram. Okay, I'm just going to show you how that actually works. What that really means is that after you've drawn the cumulative frequency graph, what I can actually do is I can also construct a box plot based on the cumulative frequency graph, really because they do have the same values that we're looking at. Okay, so here's a quick summary of what a box plot is. The 5 number summary that we always look at when it comes to drawing a box plot, which is the lowest value, the lower quartile, median, upper quartile, and the highest value. And you realize that all these 5 numbers can be found on the cumulative frequency graph as well. And that's why we can actually make that connection between these two graphs. And I'll show you how it looks like. Okay, so this is the cumulative frequency graph that we have produced. Now, we just found the minimum, which is obviously at 0. This was the upper value, which is the maximum value, which is at 40. This was the median. The green one is the lower quartile, and the orange one is the upper quartile. Now, if you think about this, what I could do is, if I draw a box plot, now we know that this is like your whisker. This is your minimum value, which is at 0. The maximum value will be 10. The median, which is the line here, is going to be 3.2. And the lower quartile is going to be 2.6. And the upper quartile, which is at this line here, is going to be 3.8. And if you think about this, I could actually just produce a box plot from a cumulative frequency graph as well, which is something that I've seen before in tests and exams. So just something that you want to take note of when you make your notes for this. Okay, all right, ladies and gents, I hope this review helps. Please give me some feedback on the video if you think it's if it's helpful. I'll be very keen to make more. If you think that there is something that I can improve on and what I should do about my videos in the future, please do give me some feedback. And hopefully, if you like the video, please press the like button, subscribe to my channel, okay? And I'll see you guys soon, okay? Stay safe. All right, take care, everyone. Goodbye.